Hi book friends, I'm Erin, and this is Erin Go Read. Hey, editing Erin here. I just wanted to mention, because I don't go into it in the rest of this video, because this video is more about books that I had read like earlier in the spring. But I'm very much aware of and supportive of Black Lives Matter, and I am educating myself reading books. I don't mention in this video because I mentioned them in the booktube prize video, wrap-up video for the last round. Serendipitously, I just read three amazing books by Black authors. Actually, you know what? One of them is a white author. Two by Black authors, but three that really dive into injustices and systemic racism. And so I'm really glad actually that I had just read those books, because it was really fresh in my mind. Between the three books, there was a variety of a broader look at systemic racism and then more personal accounts. And so I'm really glad that I had that kind of front loaded as we're going into this season of change, much needed change. So I also wanted to share with you, I mentioned this in my TBR, but I am, on my Kindle, I'm going through the book Me and White Supremacy by Layla Saad. At the time that I got it, it was a free download. It was a free Kindle download if you had Amazon Prime. So that's how I got it. And at the end of each chapter are a series of questions or prompts that you're supposed to actually journal. And so I have been doing that. And I think I actually want to do a vlog. Not necessarily, it's supposed to be 28 days worth. So I don't think I'm 28 separate times I'm going to come on and like answer all my questions for you. But I think what I will do is kind of summarize my feelings in my own revelations about my whiteness. And there's it requires you to take a hard look at yourself, and that's needed. I can't remember, there was a quote that I saw just recently on Instagram, and it was something along the lines of, when you're accustomed to a privilege, equality feels a lot like oppression. And I think that in our white fragility, that's what a lot of us who benefit from white privilege have to come to terms with, and that we are complicit. We have to do the work to help solve that problem and create healing in a safe place. I also want to recommend a particular Black booktuber, Seji at the Artisan Geek. She is very young, and I typically don't get on too well with really young booktubers just because there's such an age gap. But she reads quite diversely. She reads classics. I've got a couple really good recommendations from her, and she's just so thoughtful. She's one of these young people that, well, it makes me feel old, but it makes me feel like proud of the generation coming up. And so I highly recommend checking out the Artisan Geek. And she has a couple videos pertinent to the subject matter up recently. So now I'll send you back to the real video. It's been kind of a crazy couple of months for me. As you may know, my husband passed away on April 3rd. And so understandably, of course, life has been just a bit different. And I think the only video I put up in May was my May TBR. So other than the books for the BookTube prize, I haven't actually wrapped up books from like March. So I have 8 books that I read recently that I'm just going to talk about a little bit. Right now they're in a stack by size order, so I think I'm just going to go with that because I don't really have any rhyme or reason for any other way to do it. So I did read some books for the Asian Readathon, and one of those books was The Sailor Who Fell from Grace with the Sea by Yukio Mushima. So it centers around Noboru, a young teenage boy who lives with his mom. I believe his dad, I can't remember if his dad left or his dad had passed away years before. And she ends up kind of dating this sailor, or seeing this sailor. They live in a port city, and he becomes kind of, Noboru becomes kind of enthralled with him. And so it ends up going really dark. So one thing, as my memory, just in the processing and everything of my husband's death, and then all of the work I've been putting into my health coaching business, things aren't sticking like super strong in me as far as plot goes. So, and it's also a very small book, so I don't want to really give you a full plot summary here. But this book ends up getting really dark. So it was one of those where it was like super interesting but disturbing at the same time. And I actually absolutely would reread this. I kind of want to now that I'm talking about it, just to even remember what really happened. I remember feeling quite conflicted and like, I am enjoying this, but this is getting really dark. Why am I enjoying this darkness so much? So that's a good read. Another book which I hardly remember anything about, I know I enjoyed it at the time, was the first book of the Earthsea books. What's the first one called? The Wizard of Earthsea, the first of the Earthsea novels. This is a bind up of the first 4. I think there are 5 or 6 altogether, so kind of annoying that this is only the first 4. So I definitely think I would need to reread this. There's some sort of wizarding school kind of stuff in this. Our main character has some sort of magical powers. I really don't remember. I need to reread this. Why am I even talking about this? Okay, a book that I really, really love by one of my favorite authors. This is Nocturnes by Kazuo Ishiguro. This is a series, this is a, is it 5? Yeah, 5 kind of interlinking short stories. So they all have to do with music and with the nighttime. And the thing I love about Kazuo Ishiguro's writing is he's a storyteller. When I'm reading his books, I feel like I'm like a second grader sitting on the floor, crisscross applesauce, listening to the librarian read to us. I feel so comforted and like safe in his writing. And I just thought this was another really great work by Kazuo Ishiguro. Speaking of a warm hug, my friend Megan, who is an avid reader and has been since she was very young, sent me, after my husband died, The Velvet Room by Zilpha Keatley Snyder. And Zilpha Keatley Snyder is a local author. I think she mostly lived in Marin County, which is where Megan is from and where I lived for a year. All of her books are kind of set in California and involve kind of California history in some way. So this is a mystery about this girl. They're moving from one place to another, and they end up on this property with this old abandoned house, and our main character is quite mischievous, and she's just always running off and getting into some sort of adventure. And so she finds adventure in this house, and there's a bit of a mystery component to it, and it was just really sweet and lovely and exactly what I needed at that time, especially because the nonfiction books that I was reading at that time for the BookTube prize were very heavy topics. And so having this like sweet middle grade historical mystery was exactly what my little heart needed. So then back again to the Asian readathon. This is Island of a Thousand Mirrors by Nayomi Munaweera. And this was the book that I owned the longest that I had not read yet. So I bought this book in 2012. It is a signed edition. I bought this actually in Marin County at the Book Passage. They host lots of book events. And so sometimes I will even just drive there just to get autographed copies. It makes kind of a cool gift. So in this story, we have these kind of dual and conflicting narratives of 2 young women in Sri Lanka. So one, and she really kind of dominates the story. She gets a lot more kind of page time than our other main character. Her family lives in the south of Sri Lanka, and they are Sinhala, which is the ethnic majority. And then they're kind of a middle class kind of family. And then we just kind of follow her as her life goes on, that her family ends up moving to Los Angeles. And so then we have their family in Los Angeles, but then also their ties still back in Sri Lanka amongst the Civil War. So then our other main character, she is a Tamil, which is the ethnic minority, and her story kind of is the minority story in this story. And so we also see her very different life and what it's like to be the ethnic minority and then not getting to leave and being there still during the Civil War between the Sinhala and the Tamil. It was just a really well done story. I felt like I got a peek into a culture, into a war that I knew nothing about. And I'm really interested to read more from Nayomi Munaweera. The last book that I read for the Asian Readathon is a graphic memoir by George Takei. They call this Enemy. And so this is him as a young boy. They lived in the Bay Area. I think in San Francisco at the start of World War II, or U.S. involvement in World War II after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. And so we follow him and his family as they are shipped off to an internment camp. They end up moving to a second internment camp mid-war. And it's interesting to see it through his child eyes. He was a child while they were in internment, and then when they get out, you get some perspective of him as a teenager and just kind of the natural inclination for teenagers to rebel and question. And so you see him questioning his father and why they just laid down and took it. And then you get his perspective more as an adult man and really admiring his father. And one thing I really loved about this, and I think speaks a lot to the culture, both when he's a child and then as he's writing it as an adult, you can really feel the respect and honor that he shows his parents. He really sees admirable qualities in both of his parents, and he points those out. So I really love that. It's a quite pleasing style, black and white, really great expressions in the art too, to feel what, to get an idea of the feelings of the characters. So yeah, I really enjoyed this and would recommend it. I'll probably have my niece, who's 10, probably have her read this maybe over the summer. And the nonfiction book here, the only nonfiction book I've read and finished recently that wasn't for the BookTube prize, is Atomic Habits by James Clear. You may have seen before I'd recommended The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, and I still recommend that book. And James Clear kind of riffs off of Charles Duhigg's work, and he mentions him multiple times in Atomic Habits. And when he talks about atomic habits, he's talking about the very smallest piece. So tiny changes, remarkable results. So he goes into a bit the process of forming a habit, and then gives you ways to break bad habits, build new habits. It's definitely not, if you've read The Power of Habit, it's definitely not repetitive. It builds off of that work and adds to it. And it's one that, as I'm writing the book that I'm writing right now, on living a healthy lifestyle for caregivers, I'm dipping in and out of both of these books actually for information. So if you're at all interested in self-improvement, highly recommend Atomic Habits by James Clear. And finally, we have The Sleeper and the Spindle by Neil Gaiman, and illustrated by Chris Riddell. This is actually usually for Christmas, I will give my and my husband's siblings some sort of like nice kind of special book. And so this was last year's pick, and I hadn't read it myself yet. And so this is Neil Gaiman's adaptation or retelling of Sleeping Beauty. And the art, Chris Riddell's art is just fantastic. It has this black and white tone, and then I don't know if you can see, there'll be bits of gold just there every now and then throughout the story. And so it's just that black and white and bits of gold. I thought it was really well done. I was never interested really in Sleeping Beauty, but I really enjoyed the story, and I will definitely be rereading this in the future. Really great book for cozy reading night. So these were some of my recent reads. There were others, especially like audiobooks that I got from the library that I don't have, so I'm just not going to talk about them. But I have been reading. I just haven't been feeling like talking about my reading necessarily. So I really appreciate all of the support and kind words that you guys have shown me. It's great to be able to have this community to connect to. And even if I'm just watching videos and not contributing at the time, it's exactly what I need sometimes. Thank you for watching. See you around the tubes.